All right, guys, this is a Ask Me Anything About Music Production. So we are live. Let me crank this up a little bit. So if you're new here, I'm Game from BusyWorksBeats.com. We trained over 1 million producers around the world. Some are going to work with Drake, Kanye West, Post Malone, Ariana Grande, French Montana, Young Thug, Polo G, Trippie Redd, Lil Baby, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, a long list of artists around the world. So shout out to you guys for being successful. Today I'm going to answer your questions about music production, really anything you could think of in music production, and I will share my experience with you guys. So give me a second to share this with the Discord real quick. You guys should come hop in our Discord. It's discord.gg/BusyWorksBeats. I'll leave a link in the chat real quick. BusyWorksBeats. How do you make trap beats? You're going to need, really trap is about the drums. You said trap drums. How do you make trap drums? Learn hi-hat rolls and tresillo. So tresillo is ta, 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 ta. You don't have to play your drums in that way, but you know, tresillo is a big part of hip hop, big part of trap. It is the kind of foundational rhythm behind Afrobeat, reggaeton, hip hop, Mob West Coast. Let me turn the chat on. There we go. Mob West Coast, you name it. Tresillo is just a very ubiquitous pattern. Ta, ta, ta. Now, again, you don't have to play it. Ta, 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 ta. It could be ta, 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 or it could be ta, 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 ta. You know, there's different ways to play tresillo, but it's all about that one pattern. Hi-hat rolls. I have videos about hi-hat rolls on the channel. Cracks, what up? Chances here. He says, Crack says, what are the best headphones for producers? I don't think there's a best. The short answer for you is that every set of headphones has a bias. That bias could be plus 3 dB in any frequency. The reason that's bad is because if I crank my vocal up, let me give you guys an example. If I add an EQ here and I boost a random frequency at 3 dB, let's see. All right, I just boosted my lows 3 dB. Do you hear how much of a difference that is? So here's before, and then here's after. Very boomy, very in your face. And that frequency could be anywhere. There's no one frequency. So the fact that headphones can have up to a 3 dB bias means that no headphones are truly accurate, no matter which company you go with. They're like microphones. They have different EQ sweet spots, but as far as like one master race headphones, if I had to say one company, it's Audeze. They figured out the formula. So look up Audeze MM series, Manny Marroquin. They sent me the Audeze MM500s. It literally makes my Sennheisers, it makes my Sennheiser 600s and my 598s sound like a piece of paper. That's how dramatically different these are versus those. It was like, it made me realize, like, am I really wearing headphones? So they have an affordable Audeze MM. I think it's called the MM100, very affordable, like around the 300 range, which is almost cheaper than the Sennheisers. And trust me, if they're anything like these, they will sound light years different. What up, produced by, how do you say that? Psilocybe. Bryce going crazy, what up? Thank you for hopping in with this, Bryce. Let's see here. Vision is here, what up? Hood known, welcome back. Vermin says, that song Riot, it doesn't sound very good in my car. That song. I'm trying to remember. Oh, that rock song. I learned from somebody, I forgot who it was. But it was like a good, you know, it was a class, what is the word? It was a classic mixing engineer. And forgive me for not giving them the credit. I just forgot who it was. But they basically said like I think it was Ken Lewis, was it? It might have been Ken Lewis or somebody in that ilk, whatever it is. Basically, they said a song is either mixed for the car or for the headphones. It's rare that it's like going to perfectly translate on both, like to hit the same exact way for both. And I understand now because when I first heard Taylor Swift's song, I forgot what it was, but I was like, this is so upfront and muddy. Like, how is this a top song? And it's because if you go in the car, it hits different. So, yeah, so you just got to pick. If anything, buy some of these Apple earphones. They're like 15 bucks off of Amazon. And that's what the majority of people are listening to music through. So why mix for a car? Not everybody has the money for a car. But people have the money for an iPhone and some headphones. I mean, think of it that way. How many more people have a phone and some headphones than they have a car? Like teenagers have phones. They don't have cars yet. So a car is a luxury environment. Clarence says, can I take your 10-hour beat class if I use Ableton Live? Yeah, but the one thing is I'm not teaching Ableton fundamentals. So as far as like shortcuts in Ableton or workflow stuff, I don't teach that. So outside of like me using, I mean, put it this way. I learned mixing from a guy who was using Pro Tools and I didn't have Pro Tools. So music production is the same way. Once you have a good teacher though, not everybody teaches principles. They teach hacks and tactics in a DAW. I teach music production as a concept, which you can apply to other DAWs, but it will be a little bit difficult to copy every single little shortcut that I do. So I got to be honest about that. One day maybe we'll cover Ableton, but we don't get enough people asking about Ableton to cover it. So that's the reason why. Shout out to everybody putting your questions in the chat. I'm going top to bottom here. So if you see me kind of lagged, it's because I'm just answering one by one. And I appreciate you guys for being so thorough. Track Titan says, can you start doing beat reviews for producers and give some constructive feedback for the producer community? Yeah, we do that every Friday. Come hop in our Discord. It's a discord.gg/busyworksbeats. Let me show you guys what it looks like. Let me make sure you guys can actually see. All right, you guys should be able to see the Discord. Pardon me. So within the Discord, we have, let's see how many people we have in here. We have 115,000 members on our Discord now. Shout out to you guys. We should get our Discord plaque soon. Just playing. But we have 115,000 people in our Discord. And what was I talking about? I forgot that fast. Oh, beat reviews. So every Friday we go live. Once you join our Discord, click at the top where it says Busy Works Beats. Click where it says Show All Channels. And then you'll be able to see everything on the left side. So on the left side, scroll down to where you see feedback, and then look for where it says song feedback. And this is where I usually go live. And this is where people post their songs. And then I'll go top to bottom and we'll go through that. So that's on Fridays. So just hop in our Discord, discord.gg/busyworksbeats. Let me do it one more time in the chat just in case I didn't do it before. Here's the link. Works Beats. If I can spell it, there you go. Female Grizzy says, I have trouble coming up with drum patterns. Pretty much every drum pattern starts with tresillo. It's ta, 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 ta. That's drill, for example. At 144 BPM, ta, 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 ta. If I slow it down to 93 BPM, boom, 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 you get the West Coast mob sound. If I go to 108 BPM, you get Afrobeat. Wait, I'm trying to think of the sounds they would use. Dum ka ta 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 dum ka ta 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 tresillo ta ta tresillo ta ta. It's all tresillo is what I'm trying to say. Once you have that rhythm, you'll understand so much about rhythms. Even in EDM, they use tresillo, but they do a continuous tresillo. So it's like tresillo, sillo, 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 tresillo, sillo. It's equidistant measure between each note. That sounds more complicated. Just try boom, boom, boom. I guarantee you're going to start coming up with 1,000 rhythms just based off that one principle. Chance of a Lifetime, welcome. P, the producer, says, what's your thoughts? Excuse me, I read that wrong. What's your thought process when starting a beat from scratch? Well, the first thing, if I had to start this beat from scratch, I'm going like, what am I trying to create? Like, what is the intent behind it? Am I trying to go for a reminiscent feeling? Am I going for nostalgia? Am I going for modern? Am I going for gritty? What's the thing I'm actually trying to create? A lot of people just like, they don't have ideas going into the DAW. They're not trying to create anything. And in that case, that's fine. Just understand that you're in a learning mode. So it's better that you just discover stuff than trying to force like where to go. But, you know, imagine, okay, I'm going to make this short because it's a long explanation, but imagine your studio. We have the privilege to open up our computer and just make stuff. Back in the day, you would have to have an idea, write the idea down on sheet music, gather other musicians who can actually play the music, practice. Then you would book a studio. And then in the studio, which was very costly, you would have to get everybody in one place at one time, record, hope everything went well. Then you have to buy the tape. And then you got to like do the whole process of tape duplication and everything else. And hopefully you don't need a mixing engineer and all them. So that's a lot of steps. And my point is nowadays we just click an app, it opens. Because there's no preliminary work up to the work, that's where a lot of people don't have a definitive idea. They're just like, they open up FL and they're just like, oh, what do I do today? But back in the day when they went to the studio, they had a concept already. It wasn't like some thing where they're just chilling around in the studio for the average person. So the way I like to teach beginners this, or people who are just stuck in that rut, is when you open up FL Studio, have two intents, meaning intent, plural. The first intent is to learn and discover new stuff. And just, if you're in that mode, just click around. Don't have any expectations to finish. Just your goal is to discover new stuff. That's it. The second intent is to actually translate what's in your brain into the computer. That's a whole different process than somebody who's trying to discover a way to do something. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. You got to like have lab time where it's experimental, and then you got to have translation time where it's about creating a product. That probably wasn't the answer you wanted, but also there's a 4-layer, step to making a song. You have the top line, which is your memorable melody. You have the harmony, which is your chords. You have the contrast layer, which is your bass and your counter melody. And you have what's called the rhythm. Those are the 4 things that make up your song. So if I were to make a song from scratch, I usually start with chords because that gives me room for a melody. After that, I come up with the bass line, and then I add the drums. Dr. Equinox says, hey, bro, I just started getting into sound design. How long would it take to make music like Extruder, Skrillex, or EDM guys like that? I'm not so well versed in the modern sound of EDM. I don't know like their technique. You might have to hit up Drew from Do Sounds, buy that $1,000 consultation, and just get, he's created sound packs that you guys use for EDM and stuff. So he is in the trenches as far as that goes. So I would refer to him as far as that knowledge base. But yeah, it just started in the sound design. How long would it take to make music like that? I don't know. Somebody in the chat has a better answer than me, because even me producing for years and years and years, I can't say I could just open up FL and make a Skrillex type track right today. I can't, because it's a different flow. Like with EDM, I've noticed that they build their concepts around sound design, whereas in hip hop, we're really sample based, whether it's drums or a loop or a sample from a record. Whereas EDM, they build differently. Like their technique is sound design. So to get the bass to do what it has to do, you have to learn sound design. It's a whole different way of going about composition, in my opinion. Produced by Psilocybe. It says, any tips for someone who spent the last 5 years learning Logic and is now having to learn FL? Mainly struggling, with workflow speed, as I already know how to mix and master. Coming from Logic. Trying to think of what would hinder you. Let me think on this for 2 seconds. As the chat GPT would say, I'm reasoning right now. I'm reasoning, okay? Let me reason real quick. I would say from Logic Pro, the one thing you have to get used to in FL Studio is that the stock sounds are not the same as Logic Pro. Logic Pro has way superior stock sounds. So that's going to be a hindrance, because now you're going to have to figure out which VST gives you the so-and-so sound. And that's a whole journey unto itself. Nextly is in Logic, they've added it recently, but the step sequencer, that used to be a foreign thing in Logic. You would have to produce your drums in the piano roll. Nowadays they have the sequencer, so it's a little bit easier. But I would say getting familiar with how this channel rack, it's called, works. This is your main kind of rhythm hub. Okay, this is where all the rhythms get made for the most part. And it is a little bit different than Logic. Logic has the same color steps, so it's very different to look at visually. You have to train your eye on visuals. Another thing I would say is don't get caught up in FL Studio themes, because you want to learn FL based on its default colors, because colors mean your brain can quickly associate something. The moment you start using themes and all this, your brain's going to have a hard time reading the browser and just different things around FL, to where it slows you down. So if you have any themes, take them off, in my opinion. And lastly, I would say from Logic Pro, I guess the workflow is that Logic Pro usually has the inspector and the everything kind of right there, whereas FL, you got to figure out where the mixer is. That's a little bit of a workflow difference. But also too, the browser's on the left side, and the browser's probably where you spend 50% of your time in FL Studio. So I would focus on learning the browser. And I have videos on FL Studio shortcuts and stuff. I don't think it's the shortcuts you need to know. I think it's just, you need to get used to the channel rack being your main place instead of this area, the playlist, because in Logic Pro, it's the opposite. You produce in the playlist area, and maybe you go to the step sequencer to do drums. Like, so you gotta, the channel rack is superior in FL Studio. It's just where stuff goes down. Then you go to the what's called the piano roll, which is where you add your melodies and stuff. You gotta, here's another tip. I won't make this long. You know, Logic Pro's piano roll, I can't even envision it in my head. But the main thing about FLs is that it's the best, period. The only thing I wish they did by default is if you go to piano roll options, go to view, go to where it says key labels, go to all notes. That will help you tremendously. Turn on all note key labels, period. And what else do I have to say about this? Oh, make it full screen, okay? Because in other DAWs, they'll have the piano roll like this big. How are you supposed to make a melody with this tiny screen? Like, it's impossible. So make your piano roll, get used to making your piano roll very big so that it eats up the entire screen, okay? Because you will live in the piano roll once you get into melodies, and you will live in the drum rack, channel rack, when it comes to making your drums. And then you put the stuff in the playlist. So that way it's in reverse of Logic. Y'all couldn't see that the whole time. Dang it. My fault. I swore I was showing you something. I'm so sorry. Nothing really needed to be shown outside of the piano roll option, where you go to piano rolls, go to view, and then go to key labels, go to all notes right there. Boom. That's the only thing that is visual. But basically I was saying, dang it, yo. I just didn't know the camera was on me and not the screen. Here's the channel rack. I was pointing this out, and I was just showing you to make the piano roll big and full screen like this. So in FL, we produce from the channel rack first, and then we put stuff in the playlist. Whereas Logic Pro, you produce straight into the playlist, and maybe you'll pull up the step sequencer. So it's a different workflow in that way. Dang, I'm salty that you didn't see that whole time. My fault. Skull Notes says, if you have quality sounds, how much mixing should you do for a decent mix? Trying to think of where I have quality sounds. So let's pull up a drum real quick. Let's from Tammuz. Let's pull up Tammuz's drum breaks. So he has soul session packs, reel to reel, golden groove, which is like a funk type vibe. You know, he has a bunch of stuff. So let's go to his soul pack, for example. Now he's a drummer, but he also does other melody stuff. Let's go to his dry recording. That sounds like a little bit of reverb. I don't know if that's on the mic or what. Okay, that's dry, meaning like unaffected. Here's the affected one. Nothing really changed outside of like maybe the kick got a little bit thumpier. So when you have a decent source sound, you're not really doing anything to make it better. You're doing something to make it different. And that's the difference. Whereas when you have a bad sound, you're trying to work and work and work to make it better. Whereas when you have good sounds, you're just trying to make them different, not better. That's the difference. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it does come to sound. And that's not the answer everybody wants, though. Bryce going, really shouldn't have to mix. Like if your beat needs mixing, it's because like the source sounds are not good, or they're not at their final like form, I should say. Bryce says, do you think it would be hard to go into the industry as a white rapper? I got a bit of a noticeable Texas type accent too, so would that make it possible? I mean, whenever you're thinking about something negative, what's the opposite, and is it true? So something I learned in philosophy, if you have a belief that is not universally true, it's not true. Meaning if I say only black people can dunk, that has to be universally true. Like I have to scope all the games in the NBA, you know, the G League, the whatever league, and I have to see, has anybody outside of being black dunked? Because if the answer is yes, then my belief is incorrect. It's not universally true, meaning that it's not true in every single case. So in your case, you're saying, do you think it'd be hard for you as a white rapper? Okay, let's flip it and say the opposite. Do you think it'd be easy for you as a white rapper? Now let's look at white rappers who are successful. Eminem, by leaps and bounds. Like to the point where there's still major fans of Eminem. Logic is technically half black, half white, but you know, he's visually white. Okay. So he's sold his catalog for what, 30 million or something crazy during the pandemic. He's up. Who else is like a big, The Alchemist is killing it right now. And he's a producer, but he turned artist. He's killing it. And he's not seen as like an outsider. He legitimately made some of the greatest, most classic sounds in hip hop, and he likes to rap. So he's like, let me just rap now. What's stopping him? He's already gained his authority. I'm sure somebody in the chat could add more names to that pool, but whenever you have a belief like that, you have to say, what is the opposite, and is the opposite true? And then you can disprove your own belief there, because it's holding you. It's called a limiting belief. But you also have to look at conditions that if this happens, then there's a lot more to what I'm saying. But Remy said, and also there's Jack Harlow. Now I'm thinking my brain's starting to work. There's Ian, as far as modern artists, Jack Harlow, Ian, a lot of standout. There's what's the dude? Rugrats freestyle dude. I forgot his name. 1800 something. Rugrat. I forgot his name. Thank you for all you do. Thank you. Jay Lambo. Hood Known says you have to know the EQ curve of your headphones. True in a way. True-ish. Justify X's. Have you tried the M50X? No, I may have, but I may have. The answer is I may have, because Sweetwater sent me some back during like 2020 for the professional studio. And I think I used them, but I can't remember. I think I gave them away, but I do know for sure I used the M20X's. But would I use those to mix? Heck no. I use the Audio Technica stuff to record, because they don't have, it's closed back. And I'm not using it to listen to frequencies. I'm just, do I hear myself on the beat? Do I not? That type of thing. Clutch says, how do you get a sample? Let me read this slow. Clutch says, how do you get a sample and make it not sound off beat? I tried to add trap drums on a soul sample and it sounds off beat. It's because you didn't chop properly. And what I mean properly is that soul samples, their rhythm, like I could put a metronome on for 70 BPM. Actually, this is a great example, because Tammuz has, this is a great example. I just got to figure out one that doesn't have. Basically, okay, here's a real drummer. Now I'm going to play a loop and just ask yourself in your head, does it sound on beat? All right, so let me cough real quick. Dang, I like swallowed air the wrong way and that's just like stuck. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is drag this loop into the playlist so we can visually line up the audio. And what you'll notice very quickly is that if you look at what are called the pointy parts of the audio, or the transients, they're not lining up to the grid. So let me make the browser smaller. So right here, this kick is supposed to be after that 2 mark, but it's not. And if you listen to that entire loop, it didn't sound off beat. So if I scroll through, and if I make this even more granular, let's go down to like 1/4 beat. Okay, so the kick hits the downbeat, snare hits over here. So you can see visually, the snares are not lining up to the grid. They're a little early, but that's what makes a real drummer. A drummer does not play boom like perfectly on the metronome, because it's too predictable, and the way the ear works is it needs differences in timing and pitch to keep interest. And you can see here, even on the second time around, that snare is way off the grid. So the same thing happens with music from the 70s, the 60s, the 80s, when it wasn't super quantized. The BPM drifted because they're basing it off of a real drummer. They're not basing it off of a click track, like beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, boop. This is not, I mean, maybe they had it back then, but a real drummer, they're going off of him or her. So what I'm saying to you is, when you are producing, you have to listen in and say, okay, even if it's 3/4 of a bar, you need to go in and be like, this part is off by like a smidget. You need to chop this part, and then manually line it up to your project. A quick way to do it is the slip tool. Just hit Alt, left click, and just drag it like that. Okay, so that's a little bit faster and a little more what's the word? Like it blends it better than if you just did it hard movements. Okay, so now you still have to deal with clicking and popping and all these little details about sampling, but that's what you have to do in your musical sample as well. So you have to identify the downbeat, the snares, where they're supposed to land, the downbeat, and then make however many chops you need to make for it to actually line up with your grid. A lot of people are lazy. They just chop 2 bars and they're like, okay, they slap some drums over it. And they're like, why does it sound off beat? You didn't make enough chops. That's why a lot of producers back in the day, they would, like Jay Dilla or something like that, they would chop like, that wasn't a style. It was because they couldn't get it on beat either most of the time. So that's why they chopped it in little chops, so that when you add them all up, you can control the groove better and also the timing of those main parts of the audio. So worst case scenario, chop your sample into like, 4 beats in a bar, and then like move that around where you have to. Any tips on making your way into the industry, making connections? I'll let the chat kind of add some of their stories. I mean, it's kind of like saying, how do you walk into a club or a ballroom? Let's make this not a nightclub scenario. Oh yeah, I just gotta clear my throat real quick. All right. So Maddie P says, any tips on making your way into the industry or making connections? It's analogous to you asking me, how do you walk into a ballroom or a gala and like meet people? It's like, well, firstly, you go up to the people who aren't dancing first. And then you say, hey, what's up, guys? What's your name? Whatever. What do you do? Where you're from? Why are you here? And then you ask, okay, who's that on the dance floor? You don't just go straight to the dance floor and try to talk to people in their ear like, hey, I know you're dancing the salsa right now, but can you listen to my music? And that's what most people try to do. They forget that the people who are on the dance floor are dancing. And I don't mean that literally. I mean, metaphorically, they're dancing, meaning they're in the trenches right now working on something. If they took their attention off that thing, it would collapse the thing. So you have to figure out the timing to even approach that person, or who's the person of the person that's around them that you need to talk to and get familiar. You need to be known. If you walk into a dance, for example, nobody knows you from a hole in the wall. Nobody owes your conversation, for one. Nobody owes you any business, for 2. And for 3, nobody can hear you. It's a dance. It's a dance gala or whatever. The music's already blasting. Okay, so what I'm trying to say metaphorically is you need to introduce yourself to everybody in the periphery, figure out the hierarchy of the group, and then you wait for people to get off of the dance stage. Okay, if you want to approach anybody on the dance stage or dance floor. And then you get their information to not pitch them on, hey, listen to my music right here where we're playing music already. It's, hey, 2 weeks from now when they're at a different function or they're online and posted something, then you comment on that and you build rapport. Then you start talking about your stuff way after you've already, been interested in somebody else or added value to them. I think the issue that people have with music in general is they want everybody to care about them. Nobody cares. And I'm saying that so that you stop wasting your time. Nobody cares about your stuff, period. You have to care about other people's stuff, solve their problems, and then they'll care about you. That's just a life principle. I didn't build this channel by just making videos about just whatever. Like, the whole channel was built off of trying to help you guys first. I was actually helping this dude. His name was Chi Beats. We were in this private Facebook group about music production and selling beats online. And Chi Beats had a question about how to make Detroit synth music. And I listened to it and I was like, oh, I know how to sound design that. And I showed him how to do it. And I put it up on YouTube because there was no other way to show him outside of uploading it to YouTube. I didn't have any other video hosting platform that I could afford. So me trying to help somebody else turned into me helping 10 people and then 100 people and then 1,000 and then 10,000. And I helped people first. I didn't ask them for anything. I didn't have a product until 14 or 2015, which I was on YouTube since what year was that? Since probably freshman year, so 2009. So for 4 years, 5 years, I did not ask for anything. I kept adding value and adding value over and over and over again. How do you sum up sampling? Sampling, at least in hip hop, the definition for hip hop, let me make sure you guys can hear this audio. Hold on one sec. Sampling. Okay, cool. So sampling in hip hop, technically the definition for hip hop is when you combine a musical sample with a drum break. That's the true definition of hip hop. It's when you combine a musical sample with a drum break and you get a new creation called a hip hop beat. So as far as hip hop, that's what sampling is. But sampling can be sampling a drum, sampling me going like this. You know, I could record that and that could be a sample. So it depends on what you mean by that. Nelson says, which is easy for a beginner when making a trap beat? Well, let me read this slower. Nelson says, which is easy for a beginner when making a trap beats, the drums first or chords? If you're making trap beats for the first time, learning your music theory might be a little bit of a better approach to it. I think people think music doesn't matter. And then when they figure out how to make their 808 roll and their hi-hat rolls, they're wondering why they make the same beat over and over and over and over again. It's because you can't really skip over the music part. Drums can always be learned. You know, that's a secondary thing in my opinion. And it's not that complicated. So Jay Lambo says, how can you produce music for a living? To do anything for a living, you're going to have to do much more than that thing. Like, to be a YouTuber, you don't just do YouTube. I have a sound business. I have an education business. I don't just do YouTube. The same thing with music. You don't just produce songs and call it a day. Like, that would be the easy life set on easy. It's not that way. You have to be good at business. You have to be good at your music skills. You have to be good at making content so that people care. It's much more than just producing a song, especially for a living. That's the way, yeah. So there's a lot of answers to your question, but that's the main mindset shift that you have to make, is that there's no career where you just make beats, say nothing, aren't known. You know, maybe there's 1 out of a million people who are like ghost producing or something, but no, nowhere in life is that even a real job. And I don't mean that you can't make money doing music. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, there's nowhere in life where you could just make beats, talk to nobody, do no networking, do no business, don't understand anything about the back end, not reach out to any. There's nowhere you could do that. And I think that's what people want to do. That doesn't exist. I mix for Boombox in Chicago. Shout out to you. Smo Mega. Derek says, how can text when ghostwriting? I don't know what that means. Clutch says, how do you get a sample and make it not sound offbeat? Okay, I answered that one already. Cool. SG90 says, I need help mixing and mastering. All right, cool. Well, I just put up a 10-hour course, which teaches you a lot of that. Justify says, mixing it for car speakers translates better to phone speakers in my experience. Do your thing then. I mean, how do you mix it for a car? Like, that doesn't even make sense, in my opinion. Unless you mean you produce and then you play it in the car, and then you're like, okay, if it sounds good here, then it goes to the phone. But when you're listening to your beat, you're listening on headphones. So it's like, for most people. But again, to each his own. Dwayne says, bet I'm going to go give you a listen. Shout out to you. Abhijit Singh says, what are your thoughts about Reaper? I've never really got into Reaper the DAW, so I have no thoughts on that. LG says, yo, man, I really want to sound like P&D and Brent Faiyaz. I want to produce like them and sound like them, but I'm lost. I feel like I won't get anywhere without a label. Not sure what to do. Wait, is that LJ? Hold up. That can't be LJ. This is not the LJ I'm thinking of. Okay, so that's somebody else. All right, so you want to sound like P and D. Well, at least old P and D, his trick was, or at least the trick I discovered, was to pitch your audio not at 440 hertz, but 445, 450 hertz. Just change the tuning of your instrument. That will get you out of the whatever you're going. Let me pick up an instrument real quick. Let's just do a keyboard. All right, so let me hold up, y'all. I gotta put up my thing. Okay, you guys should be able to see. So I'm gonna play basic chords here. Now, how do you get that type of sound? You have to learn dominant chords, and I teach that at busyworksbeats.com/music theory. So here's a minor 9 chord, and then we're going straight to a dominant chord. It's called a raise 5, raise 9, sharp 5, sharp 9. Then back to the 1, it's called. Here I'm doing an altered chord, so I'm playing F major at first, major 9, and then we're gonna flatten that third, which would usually make it a minor chord, but instead of going to F minor, which is this, we're gonna make this a 6th chord by adding what's called the 6th, which is 9 semitones. So this sounds more complicated, but basically it's a minor 6 add 9 chord. So it gives it that like 90s R&B. So for 90s and R&B stuff, you have to get used to these like dominant chord changes. Like you only need to know 2 chord types, and it's the dominant chord and the tonic chord. Let's play random. Here, let's start here. Dominant chord, tonic chord. Okay, let's do it again, but at a different key. Dominant chord, tonic chord. Okay, let's do it again, but now starting at E. Dominant chord, tonic chord. That's all you need to know is that 5-1, because that is the sound of it. And then from that point, you learn what are called altered chords, which is, I go over this stuff in Music Theory Magic at busyworksbeats.com/music theory in our Music Theory Magic course. But yeah, that's how you get that R&B type sound. Now P and D, you know, he's playing more, instead of a piano, he might use pads. So that's the main difference. And then when he's singing again, you want to try 450. So I did all that, which I forgot to even do the point of just doing all that. Which is, what if I went into my settings here and I tune the piano up to 450 hertz tuning. So we're not changing the key, we're just pitching this stuff up. So I'm gonna pitch it up. Here, getting pitched up. So now I'm at 450 hertz tuning. Let's play that same chord progression. It's gonna sound different. It has a little more upbeatness to it. Here's another technique that's more of a gospel-y thing, is sit there and ask yourself how to harmonize every single note on the keyboard. Most people are taught the keys, like, okay, but what about every single note on the keyboard? So now I'm harmonizing F. There's the F major. Now I'm gonna harmonize the next note, which is F sharp. I'm just playing a suspended chord. Or what would this even be? A, C, D would be. Whatever this is. Okay, I'm adding tension here. And then we're changing that bottom note. Now the same. I'm just figuring out a chord per the note. And that's a good exercise to really get yourself through. So if I had to make up, and slowly over time you'll learn more chords. So let's just do B, for example. Okay, Okay, so let's do that again, but now I'm gonna harmonize each note. So B, and then what would C do? That sounds pretty cool. What would C sharp do? What would D do? What would E flat do? That sounds wrong, so I would switch it up. What would E do? So I would do that per note. And that's just a good exercise in general to really stretch your brain about like, how do you come up with the chords? You'll discover chords by accident that way too. It's a fun thing to do. So I know that was a long answer, but hopefully you guys learned something. Chance says, how do you add autotune to vocals going in? How do you add autotune? Okay, so how do you record with autotune basically is they're asking. You need to open up autotune. And then on this version, you click this little gear icon and then put it on low latency mode, or else you can't really record with it. So it has to be on low latency mode. And if you're in FL Studio, you click here at the top. You want to record, you want to monitor on. And if you want to record hard boiled, then you click this little thing up here and then go to post effects. Okay, if you don't want to record the autotune onto the actual WAV file that you're recording, hit external input only. And that way you can hear yourself through autotune, but it's not hard printing it to audio, so that you can always go back and change your mind about stuff. I think I learned that from Sicky Beats. Shout out to Sicky Beats. I didn't even realize that was there. So, and then at the bottom here, you click record, and then you right click up here, the record button, make sure all these are turned on. Automation, notes, audio clips. It's just easier that way. And then you just hit record, and then you're off to the races. And then make sure autotune is turned on as you're recording. So again, that will let you hear yourself through autotune, but it won't hard print it onto the actual file, so that if you ever need to go back and change the key or something, you can. Self Mastery 888 says, knowing what you know, what would you do to learn sound selection as quick as possible in ear training? Not that I want to learn quick, just wanted to learn efficiently. It's really just about, here's the thing. Let me load up something real quick. So Native Instruments is going to be potentially one of our sponsors for the Big Beat Battle in March. Shout out to Native Instruments. And here's something that I had to learn is that in FL Studio, everything's centered around synths. And that's the problem most people have, is they're like, how do I pick sounds for Dr. Dre? Well, Dr. Dre does not use a bunch of synths all the time. He uses real instruments. So I had to get into Native Instruments ecosystem in order to learn what real instruments sound like. And I said learn for a reason. I didn't even realize that they have new instruments down here. That's fire. So basically what I'm going to do is just go through different contact libraries. Let me see if I could pull something up. So this is from DSF. I had to buy this. It's a separate product, but it's amazing. It has like all those 90s sounds in it. So when people are like, what are the sounds they used on stuff back in the 90s? Well, we have to use the stuff they actually used in the 90s. They were using the Proteus, the MoFat, the, whatever else they were using, the Chord back then. They were using so we got to start with what they had. Let me turn my keys off. Hold on. Okay, so now I know that sound on my head. Okay, that's Guitar Carlos. I go, okay, that's a Telecaster type sample. You just have to hear more sounds. So this is where they were getting that sound from. I always thought they were playing that. It's a sample. And then once I realized like, oh, it's not somebody actually playing guitar, it's a sample. You just got to find where that thing came from. It's easier said than done. You really got to do a lot of research. That's the only true answer. Is sound selection is like trying to, for example, if I wanted to make t-shirts that look like a different brand, I need to know, one, the whole t-shirt making process, what materials are generally brushed cotton. Do I do, distressed cotton? Am I doing, what kind of printing am I doing? Am I doing direct to garment? Am I doing some kind of acid print? Am I doing, whatever versions they have now? There's so many now. You have to know the technique of the craft first so that you can identify it. Like when I hear XXX Tentacion, I hear the distortion. I go, okay, he's using that thing to get that distorted rumbly sound. or chances are he's doing something very similar to get that rumbly sound. You have to know what technique gets you to a certain endpoint. And the only way to know that is to hear it. There's no other way to train your ear outside of hearing the thing. But the only way to hear the thing is to research where the thing came from. And that's the part that is boring sometimes. You're going to have to go on forums. You have to go through old interviews. You're going to have to try to get old pictures of Dr. Dre's studio to see what he had around. Like, what's that machine? Nowadays, you guys have ChatGPT, which means they have all the answers. But before ChatGPT and Grok and all that, we had to manually figure out what is that machine in the corner of Dr. Dre's studio. Nowadays, you could crop it out and ask Grok 3 what it is, and now you found the drum machine that he uses. And now you go online, you type in XYZ drum machine samples, and boom, it pops up. So nowadays, I have less excuses for sound selection here. But at the same time, it's one of those things where the only answer is to sit there for hours and listen to sounds. That's the only answer. Because that's the only way somebody knows a viola from a violin, and a cello from a viola, and a tuba from a trumpet. Like, you have to hear it. That's the only way. I could tell somebody, hey, you need a trombone. If you've never heard a trombone in your life, you're like, what does that mean? It doesn't have a definition in your brain. Self-mastery says, my last question is this. If you're familiar with the 80-20 principle, what is the 20% a new producer should learn to give them the 80% results as far as improving? Everybody wants to skip over this, and I say it almost every time in my videos. It's music theory. Like, okay, for example, Travis Scott produces in E minor, mostly. Oh, you guys can't hear my keyboard. Hold up. Now, he wouldn't use the piano, but it's E minor. How do you do Travis Scott? You got to know about your minor chords and your suspended chords. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? Forgot to pull it back down to 440. All right, so here we have the minor. And then the minor suspended second chord. That's pretty much Travis Scott, or you might even pull it up to F minor. Same thing, suspended second chords, or suspended fourth, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes up from the root. Now you got the Travis Scott vibe. Now, he wouldn't do it with piano most of the time. He would do it with like some kind of synth. It's the same vibe. Who's another artist? Drake, for example. He would do D minor add 9 chords, but without the third. So here's a D minor chord, but we're going to drop the third. So it sounds like this. And maybe he'll use something like a felt piano. I don't think I have any on here. Let's see. I don't think we have felt ones on here. I don't even know how to search that up on here. Let me open up Keyscape because it will make so much more sense. Let's just do the Keyscape felt piano. I know you guys can't see the screen, but just give me a second here. All right, so Drake might do it this way. So what I'm trying to show you is that all these concepts are music theory based. Travis Scott was the E minor, F minor. I got to cough real quick. Hold up, y'all. Travis Scott was E minor, F minor. What about Drake? Drake is D minor, but without the third. So it's just this. Okay, so it's just minor ninth chords, but without. Let's do E minor. Where are we at? E. But without that third. This might be too rich for. How do you make it more melodic? Like Drake, kind of like opulent Rick Ross type music, you would just spread out the chords. So instead of me playing all the notes all at once, you might spread it out very melodically. But we're still playing a minor 11th chord. Okay, so now it sounds more opulent just by spreading the notes out. And who else is another artist? I can't think off the top of my head. We did Travis Scott. We did Drake. I'm trying to think who else would be like a style. I don't know. I can't. You guys probably hit me in the chat, but the thing is I can't see the chat, the current chat. But you get my point. Is it starts with the theory, and then the sound is what separates the specific artist most of the time. So yeah, the 20% is music theory. I don't know why so many people want to skip it. The main thing though is harmony. Everybody wants to skip the harmony part, the chords part. That's the part that is the whole sauce. Like you can't make melodies without harmony for the most part. Melodies come from broken up chords. Like again, I could play the chord this way, or I could play it this way. Now I'm playing kind of sloppily, but. Or I could play, let's see, what's something faster? Let's do. Sounds very. It's the same chord progression I did before. I just played it melodically. So I'm trying to prove in real time. That was a lot to kind of prove in a small amount of time, but that's the 20% that everybody wants to skip over. And if the music is not good, like the musical idea, I should say, if that's not good, it doesn't matter how good you are at mixing. It doesn't matter how good you are at picking sounds. If the music is trash, and I'm saying trash meaning like you didn't put any effort into it, chances are the record's not going to sound like anything. But there's outliers in ways you could make that statement false, but that's what it is. It's the music, the underlying composition. Remy says, yo, Busy Works, how do you tackle autotune? Everybody tells me use my ear, but how do you tell when it's off beat or off tune? I would grab the plugin called Scalar 2 from Plugin Boutique. It's called Scalar 2. Basically, you can figure out the key of any song. It even does audio, so you could just drag and drop the audio straight into it. Joshua says, hey, I was going to say, what would you say is the most important thing in producing vocals? Producing vocals, the boring answer, which is the most critical answer, though, the most critical point about vocals is to record in a clean environment. What do I mean? If I take off this chat, you guys can see the vocal booth behind me. This isn't even the maximum amount of like work I could be doing, but it's very clean. So firstly, let me cough real quick. Hold up. My nose is like. My bad, y'all. I didn't drink enough water. Okay. Funny enough, as I'm recording. So back here, it's not about the microphone. It's not, okay, that's a Neumann U87 microphone. XLR connection connects it to what's called an Avalon 737 preamp. That goes into what's called a Universal Audio Apollo interface. And that goes into the computer, and that's what you guys hear from that mic behind me. That's not what makes it a good recording, though. What makes it a good recording is I'm using the GIK acoustic, portable isolation booth that Mixbus TV put me onto. I bought 2 of these and made like a half of a booth, And then I have the GIK acoustic panels up above that. It's like a false ceiling. And I do have acoustic panels in the room, but this room is not like I used to have a commercial studio. When you walked in there, you could feel the sound difference. As soon as you walked in, you could just feel it. This room is not treated that well. It's just like a couple panels on the wall. So the fact that like this is the sound, the black thing that you guys see, that's the sound of the mic. The mic itself is just translating that sound. Hopefully that makes sense. So the sound that I'm getting as far as cleanliness on how to produce the vocals, it comes from the black thing, the environment that you create. The microphone just captures the environment. Okay, so it's not the mic that gives good vocals. And I'm saying that like to a beginner, not to a pro. Because the main thing everybody wants to skip, which is the boring thing, is sound treatment, acoustic treatment. You don't need to spend a gazillion dollars on it, but you do need to realize that, okay, is the air conditioner on? Because the air conditioner could have a hum that's like, and it's so low that you don't realize it. And it could eat up your entire microphone and eat up your headroom. That simple. My AC unit isn't on right now, but it lives around 60 hertz to about 100 hertz. And that's where my voice is too. So what I'm saying is I would have to sacrifice my voice to get rid of the AC unit instead of just understanding that, okay, I need to turn the AC off when I record. I need to make sure I have, you know, if I have traffic going by, it rumbles. It's going to through the walls sometimes. So you need to have a low, if anything, a high pass filter. But at the same time, if your vocals are like mine, you don't want to cut your low frequencies because that is your voice. So you just have to, there's a lot of things you got to figure out with the recording process. But the main thing as far as producing vocals, in my opinion, is understanding how to get a clean vocal. A lot of you guys have bad recordings because you have reflections off of the wall. Like if I added a plugin even that added reverb to this, it would just sound, you know, here, let me do it real quick. Let's add some reverb. Now this is not long tail reverb. Whoa. Now this is not long tail reverb. I'm going to add what's called early reflection reverb. So this is reverb that just makes something sound wider. Okay, now my voice, you might not notice it until I make it like super dramatic. Hopefully you guys can hear it by now. Okay, check, check, check. You should really hear it because now I bass boosted it. But the problem is you can't EQ this flutter. You can't EQ this out of your recording. So if your room has a bunch of like reverb, early reflection reverb, like this stuff, it adds a tone to your sound and there's no way to get it out of your vocal. Okay, so that's the thing, is that if you guys want to get better vocals, again, focus on recording with no background noise, no AC hum, no reflections off of the walls, no, what else did I say? You know, and then you could always change the mic out. The mic is just a translation device, but what it's translating is your environment, and that's what you're recording. You're not recording the mic. The mic is recording the environment. Emo Boy Click says, I just be having trouble making 808 patterns. Look at my recent 10-hour course and then go to the chapter that says drum patterns. Just skip to that part. Hood says, I was hoping you was going to play the project I started using one of your piano tutorials. It's a beat and a hook. Excuse me, with the open verse. We'll do that on Friday. Just come Friday and make sure you're first come, first serve. Reese Guapo says, yo, what are some good books for music producers on the music business and music production other than all you need to know about the music business? The chat probably has better recommendations than me. I don't read about the music business. So that's a great question. I guess you want books specifically on the music industry, not like business in general. That's what I assume. But there's also books for, man, is there a book on music production? Not necessarily, but audio engineering, yes. There's a big Bible of a book. I wish I had it up here. The book is like this big. I think it's called Handbook for Sound Engineers. Let me find the exact name for you guys real quick. But it's like it's bigger than the Bible. Handbook for sound engineers. Yeah, that's what it's called. Here's what it looks like. Okay, so handbook for sound engineers. It's much more than 181 pages. I can tell you that. It's at least 1,000 pages. It's insanely thick. Pause. Like, it is a massive book. And maybe the PDF's floating around the universe somewhere. Look how big this book is. It's a massive book. So this book will teach you all the technical stuff. But again, when you're learning music production, you can't learn it on paper. You have to learn it through like doing it. You have to learn it through hearing it. Yeah, a couple things you could learn on paper, like maybe some music theory techniques, some recording concepts, but like the technique of music production is not in a book. And that's why the music tutorials are so important that we put out, because there is no book that I would recommend on this. But as far as music business, again, nothing in particular outside of all you need to know about the music business. I know it's not the answer you want, but if you mean general business, like how to generally be a person in business, I have 1,000 books for you. I think that's probably hyperbole. Maybe not 1,000, but 10. What's the best plugin for vocals in your opinion? There is no best plugin. It's not the answer you want. But if you had to use, again, you guys got to watch that 10-hour course. I cover all these questions in the 10-hour course. I just put it up for free on YouTube. Skip to the vocal mixing part. It's literally like 5 minutes long. It's like the shortest part in the entire course is how to mix vocals, because it's just simple. It's the 1176 Rev A. I learned this from Streaky. That sounds very good because it has a nice saturation on the vocal. And then you have FabFilter Pro L2. Basically, it's compressor, limiter. But the first compressor is a very specific compressor. And the limiter, you guys could, swap it out for any limiter that you guys have. But yeah, that's the combo. Pretty simple and straightforward. How do you redefine yourself throughout time while simultaneously listening to music from outside sources? How do you redefine yourself through time while simultaneously listening? I feel like that's how you do it. Because like, as much as people say don't listen to the radio and all that type of stuff, you're only going to be in your own thoughts. That's like going through life and never reading a book. Like, you want other people's thoughts so that you don't have to spend the time to have that, to develop the thought. Same with music. You want to listen to so much different music. And I don't mean that you have to go crazy with the styles of music, but ideas come from other people's crazy brain, the brain pulsation. You're like, wow, why did they do this random thing? You're like, let me try that random thing on my beat. Or my song, I should say. So I don't really understand the bigger part of your question, but to answer your question, how do you redefine yourself throughout time? You have to like have a core personality or core brand, I'll say, but then you have to be able to adapt the new things to your brand. So for example, BusyWorks Beats. You guys are watching BusyWorks Beats. I don't just talk about trap every single video, because trap was only a trend. I talk about music production, music theory. That's the foundation of what I teach. And then I will talk about whatever genre is popping for that specific day. So you got to figure out the thing that does not change first. And then to keep everything fresh, you introduce the new stuff. Like at Starbucks, their go-to core thing is coffee, breakfast foods, and whatever else they do at Starbucks. Let's just say coffee and breakfast food. But they know for the fall time, everybody wants to do pumpkin spice this, pumpkin spice that. So then they introduce the pumpkin spice flavors during the fall time, but they're not building a business around pumpkin spice coffee, if that makes sense. Remy says, shout out BusyWorks for giving us all this free game. Shout out to you. Derek says, what plugin do you use to sample your tag? To sample my tag? You mean, how did I create a tag? I don't use a plugin. I just record my vocals in. If anything, choking on like an apple piece. It's like stuck right there. Or a piece of hair. I just cut my hair. It's probably like a small piece of hair. Basically, the way I did vocal tags is I would just ask a friend to say their favorite, like I would say a phrase. like get this money, but in their language. So I would have different languages and I would have them say it in their language. And that was like a thing of mine. They just did it over the Apple earphones probably. You know, they weren't using a high-tech microphone. I think vocal tags are probably the only place you can get away without it being super high quality. It does not need to be like pristine vocals on it. Sweet Calf says, if concepts matter so much, why do modern day producers talk about going off mood? I mean, I'm trying to think of an analogy. It's kind of like the guy, you ever watch NBA? And the dude, to win like $1 million or whatever, he'll just he'll launch this half court shot and then make it. This analogy might be a little bit stretching, so forgive this is freestyling. But you said if concepts matter so much, why do modern producers talk about giving off mood and energy? So the guy shooting from half court for the $1 million, he's the guy doing it off of mood and energy. Now, 1 out of 1,000 people might make that shot. Shoot, just throwing the ball from half court. Is that how basketball is played, though? Basketball isn't like people just launching the ball as soon as they get it inbound and just throwing it up, trying to make it. That's not how basketball is played. Basketball is played with fundamentals, understanding how holding the ball is critical, momentum, defense, rebounding, setting up the plays and doing all the picks and rolls and all that type of stuff. That's the concepts of basketball. You could do, the and one crossover, go around your back, and then, do 1,000 things and just try to dunk every time. But, it's a probability thing, in my opinion. I do think mood and energy is more important than music theory, but I don't mean that in a way of I would always create from just not knowing anything. Your question is like very complex because there's 4 layers of knowing stuff, and I don't want to go too deep, but there's the unconscious incompetence, meaning you don't know that you don't know something. There's conscious incompetence, meaning you know that you don't know something. There's conscious competence, which means you know that you know something, and then there's unconscious competence. Most people saying mood and energy, they're talking about their unconscious competence of something. They know the thing, back of hand. If you're a beginner, you don't know the thing, so you can't produce from unconscious competence because you haven't built a repetition to have it that way. So for a beginner, going off of mood and energy is the unconscious incompetence, meaning they don't even know what they don't know. They're just doing stuff. And that's what I'm trying to warn people away from, is the ignorance. Once you skill up and you do something over and over knowingly, then you get to that part where you don't have to think about it all the time. That's what they mean by going off of mood and energy, in my opinion. So that's why I had to be careful with that answer. Jada Rude says, can you use the XYZ axis to place your vocals in different parts of the mix? I'm sure you could, but do you need to do all that? I don't think it's necessary. I mean, pushing vocals back, maybe for background vocals, you could use like a early reflections reverb, something like True Verb from Waves or Real Verb from UAD. Thank you all for submitting your questions too, by the way. I'm way back in the chat, so give me time to catch up here. How do I make Pop Smoke type beats? Get you some strings, get you Stradivari violin from Native Instruments. Here, let me pull it up real quick. Oh, I clicked the wrong plugin, my fault. I meant to click Contact. Let's load up Contact real quick. So there's a Contact library called the Stradivari series, and it's called the Stradivari violin. It sounds very good. Let me see if I can pull it up. Also, too, for Pop Smoke type stuff, very drill based. The Middle East library from Native Instruments, very good. And the India library is very good. So let me just give you an example. Here's some flute type stuff you could get into. You have to switch the scale to chromatic though, so be careful. Forgot I'm on my keyboard. Okay, and then you can reverse that if you wanted to. Then we have the Middle East, which is a super dope library. It's got a melodic. And again, I would take off the scale lock, switch this to chromatic. You can even do the Wu-Tang style. Okay, cool stuff like that. Middle East, and then you got the Stradivari violin, which is the main drill type sound, which is this more orchestral. Also, too, they have this articulation. It's called the way it's played. If you click here and go to, I always forget what it's called, like portamento. Man, I forgot the name of it. It is called, darn, I used to know where this was. It was some kind of portamento sound in here. I don't know why my brain can't figure out what it's called. Is it virtuoso? There we go. It's under sustain, and if you go to portamento, it has that pitch bendy sound. So that's going to give you like the Pop Smoke type vibe. RIP. Pop Smoke. P, the producer, says, what is the chronological order of things to learn about playing the keyboard? What should I learn first? I haven't done the keyboard learning pathway just yet. But if you're trying to speed run piano, man, there's so much to go through in theory, but I'm trying to like simplify this. I teach what are called chord codes. I teach this in our new 10-hour course, by the way. So firstly, you have to know how to create a chord. Okay. I'm going to speed through this so this is not like a tutorial. I'm just showing you. So 037 makes a minor chord. 0 is your root note. I always got my things muted. Hold up, y'all. Let's do this again. Okay, so 0 would be your root note. Count up 3 notes. 1, 2, 3. It's your minor third. And then finish it out as 037. So you just count up your keyboard. 0, count up 3. 1, 2, 3. And then 4, 5, 6, 7. Play those together. You get the minor chord. Firstly, it's understanding how to do basic triads as far as piano goes. And then understanding the sustain pedal, how important it is. Most people, they like, let me just play something. Okay, now let me play the same thing without the sustain pedal. Sounds very like amateur. It's because the sustain pedal adds this glue to everything. Okay, it's like reverb almost, but with the tone of itself. So just understanding simple things like sustain pedal, getting a MIDI controller, that's going to be your next step. Chord codes is the start of it. Then the sustain pedal is probably second. And then understanding your MIDI controller. From that point, as far as keyboards go, I would say chords are going to be your fastest route because chords, you can break chords apart into melody. So once you understand, again, I'm jumping around pretty fast here. Once you understand stuff like the dominant back to the tonic, you're going to get through a lot of genres really fast, like jazz, R&B, and then you dumb it down to trap. So you go, okay, I want to do the same thing, but for trap. So A is going to be, then you're going to go back to E. You know, you dumb it down. Instead of doing this, which is very musical. So I would say chords are going to be your fast route. I mean, and then from that point, it's about really muscle memory, if I had to really say what it was. I would say scales are next, and then memorizing the scales. Then how do you move fastly through scales? How do you melodically move faster? How do you understand intervals, stuff like that? We don't have a piano course just yet, so maybe one day we'll have that path. Johnny J says, how do you treat your low end, especially when you use sub bass? How do I treat it? Low end is, you know, get the plugin called Spectre. That might help you guys out. The lows just want to be multiplied. That's basically what it comes down to. So whenever your bass doesn't translate, it's because it wants to be multiplied. How do you multiply a bass? You add saturation or some form of harmonic distortion, which is usually saturation. So Spectre does that inside of the EQ. It does more than just EQ. It actually adds frequencies. It saturates frequencies. You said Diddy or Epstein? What do you mean? Which one? Which list do we want? I think people want the Epstein list more currently because it's more like sinister. But I don't know. Diddy has like 1,000 documentaries on Netflix and stuff. Yeah, I don't know who's more like seen as sinister. I would say Epstein only because he's tied to like billionaires and stuff. But as far as like documentaries and stuff, people weren't really talking about it. I guess because the files didn't come out yet. Emo says, I've been making beats for a while now, but I have never been able to make the 808 patterns. And when I do, they sound terrible. But how do you create great 808 patterns? It's probably your 808 sucks. It's not the right 808. It's not your pattern. It's just the 808 itself sucks. You have the wrong one. Probably. You have to collect more 808s is the answer. Creative Work says any free DAW in 2025. FL Studio is technically free. Lil Grace says just follow root notes for your 808 pattern. If you're struggling with bass, try your root note, your perfect fifth. So for example, oh, my bad, I don't have the thing up. Whoops. Okay, so start with your root note. In this case, we're just at A. Count up 7 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's called your perfect fifth. And then play the same note A up an octave. Oops. Okay, these are pivot notes for your bass. So, and then you could do sharp fives or like sharp tonic, meaning you take the note up one note, something like that. And you could jump around your bass just using those simple intervals. It's a nice way to bounce around. I would give you guys a better example, but I would have to have a whole song playing right now. You should really invest in Serato sample. I agree. Serato sample, very well worth it. Wody Mac says, what's a Wody Mac? Says, I noticed some people put notes around the chords with the same sound or transition notes. Is that usually tied to the melody since it's is a contrast? Let me figure out what you're even asking. Some people put notes around the chords. You mean like leading notes with the same sound? Yeah, okay. So you mean like this. So if I'm going from here to here, you're basically asking me, how do I add a melodic touch to the chords? Because yeah, it is a melodic touch because I could just play it this way, but it's just very straightforward chords, or I could play it. Mainly people are playing the actual chord. It sounds like they're playing all these leading tones. They're just playing a chord spread apart because it's harder to think like what other notes can I add except for a chord extension. Unless you have pre-thought a lot of this stuff. Or you might do oops. So I might ask myself, what's the top note? In this case, it's G. And if I wanted to improv, I would say, what's the fifth of G? Over time, you guys will have these answers. The fifth of G is D. You can kind of do something like that. And then you go to your next chord. So there's different ways to go, connect chords. In what course did I add that in? I want to say that was the melody mastery course, I think. We covered things like chromaticism, approaching notes, different things like that. I mean, it could get into the minutia, but it's really just a chord broken apart. But it's also intervallic. I think I woke my son up. Yes, I need to probably wrap this soon if he keeps going. All right. If I'm pretty sure my son's gonna be up for a minute, so I'm not gonna sit here and wake him up even more. That's why I can't barely record during the day and night. What's your secret to tonal balance? Just getting density around 100 hertz, 60 hertz. It's about the density of your track. Most people skip over that area. Let me play some jams till he stops. Hold up. Bitch, I'm riding hard like I'm. All right, y'all. I think he's cooling down, but if he keeps going, I'm just going to end the live. Why did you initially choose FL over Ableton? Because I remember I was at Sam Ash studio. I opened up Ableton. I couldn't even figure out how to make a pattern. I think because FL was just so easy to get back in the day. All right, he's not going to stop. So I'm just going to have to end this. I'm so sorry, y'all. But catch the 10-hour course